Hey guys, what is up? This is Swift here, and today I'll be doing a guide as to all the different steps that you can take before letting your VPS, virtual private server, or DIY NAS go live. Now, these are just some basic steps that you can follow and refer to. Well, there are other things that you can do as well, but these are just the simple stuff and the very bare basics that you can follow to ensure that there is some kind of security in place for your server before you let it go live. Now, for some background information, I have been using a shared hosting provider when I initially started, and then moved on to a VPS provider for quite some time already. The first time I did use a VPS, I wasn't very sure as to what should I do at the start, so I spent a lot of time researching and trying to find out what people say and what are the common practices, and I shifted to another VPS after that, and basically I've forgotten everything. So what I'm doing right now is basically to document what are the steps that I take actually and that you can follow as well to set up all the basic stuff before moving on to installing the web server, etc. So this is for a Ubuntu OS. If you're using other Linux distributions, the commands might be different, but the idea and concept behind it is pretty much the same. So now what I'm going to do here now is that I'm going to log into a server that I have reinstalled. So this will be what you're going to look at after all your all your OS installation. So you're gonna see it like this. Of course, if you are running it on the server itself, you will be already logged in, and you can just follow the steps as well. So you're gonna log in as root, and then you're gonna paste your password, right? Or type in whatever your password is, right? Need to copy again. Alright, so you log in, you see this, depending on the version, etc., it might be different somewhat. So the very first step, okay, before that, if you don't want to hear me rambling on explaining the different stuff as well, you can simply go to the written article, the written guide. The link will be in the description bar, and you can simply follow all the commands, copy and paste, and go through this even quicker. But this is going to be the video, and you can refer to and fro whatever you want. So the first thing you want to do first, because now you are a root user, you don't need to type in sudo, but it is good practice, and I would recommend you to do that just because I want you to just get it in your head that you can use this. So you're going to type in sudo apt-get update rather. Now what this does is that it updates all the different packages and the links, etc., and find if there are anything that you need to do to install or download to update to the latest version. Once it is done, the next step is basically to sudo apt-get upgrade. Now this will search for anything that needs to be updated, and then simply type yes, and then you install and download and install whatever that is required. Now this will take some time depending on your internet connection as well as the speed of your server, but it shouldn't take too long a time anyways. Now after this, you might require to restart your server, so if you need to, just do so. If you don't, then just continue on. As you can see here that there's quite a few things that needs to be updated. Alright, so once everything is done, you can move on to the next step. And the next step is basically create a user with sudo access. Now sudo, as you can see that we are typing earlier, is basically to give administrative rights, to give like a root kind of power to the particular command that you're going to run. Now there are a lot of advantages to this. Basically it's more secure as to using the root account itself to run commands. So you can Google that yourself or read the article that I've written for more detail on this. But so we'll just move on straight to create a user with sudo access. So to do so, first you're going to type in sudo user add -d. Now this determines where you want the home directory of the user to be, and then -m, this tells the system that to force it to create the particular directory or folder if it doesn't exist, and then you're going to type in the username. So the first part here is the directory of the home directory of this particular user. So you can just type into whatever you want. I want it to be Swift, and then so that is it. Now once that is done, you're going to add in a password for the user simply by typing sudo pass wd, the person's name or the new user, and then type in the new password for that particular user. Now the password is done. You want to add that user and grant it sudo access. Now to do so is simply adding that user into the sudo group, and all users under that particular group will have sudo access. So what you're gonna do here is type in sudo add user, the user's name, as well as at the end sudo. Now it should add, you can see there, adding user to group sudo. Now what you want to do next is basically to test out if that user has sudo access. Now to do so, you open a new window, a new terminal, and log into your server again. Now this time around, you want to log into the username, right? Don't bother about the refusing key part. That will be the next part. Then you type in the password that you have created for the user. You should be able to access it, and this is time that you can actually work on the new terminal that you have instead of root, because the next step is to basically disable the root access. But first thing first, you'll notice that sometimes that you will not have a different shell shell, yeah. So you want to change it back to this, which is more advanced. You type in /bin/ bash, and then you should enter the bash interface to make sure that every time that's your default shell thing. You simply type in chsh, type in your password, and then type in /bin/ bash. This will ensure that you will always run in the bash side client whenever you log in, right? Just some of the minor details. Now your sudo, you can check if it's working simply typing sudo any command apt-get upgrade again, or update. Then you will have to type in your password for the user, and it should work. You will see that if I do not type in the sudo, which I'll show you, it should give an error, especially for commands that require you to have administrative rights. So apt-get update, you can see permission denied. So this would tell you that sudo access is indeed granted to this particular user, and you can actually just close this particular terminal and log out of your root access. So now we are in your sudo account. Make sure if you haven't already, you always have to use the sudo term at the very start if the command requires you to have administrative rights. Now the next step is to disable root access. To do so, you simply edit the SSH configuration file by typing the following, right? Sudo nano /etc/sshd_config. You can use all your favorite text editor if you like, but I'm very accustomed to nano, and if your server does not have it, you simply have to install it. Like for example, the command nano is not found, so all you have to do is to install it. If you have other text editors that you have are more familiar with, then feel free to use them. Now I typed it wrongly. There we go, a typo. Now what's wrong there? So many typos. Alright, so this is configuration file. What you're going to do now is to look for the following. Under authentication, there is this permit root login. You're going to type in, change it to no. So once that is done, you have to restart the SSH service by typing sudo service SSH restart. Then it will show you that it's starting, it's not running again. Now to test if it's actually working, you open a new terminal. As per usual, try to log into your server. And then it should say, if you type in the password that you have earlier, you can see access denied. It shouldn't be able to log in anymore. So once that is done, you have to move on to the next part, and that is basically to disable text login and enable the key authentication system. Now, the reason why you're going to use key authentication system is that it's much more, it's safer, definitely safer. It's more secure. You can read all the pros. There are cons to it as well, but there are more pros and cons of using the key authentication system as compared to using a text login. So what you want to do here is basically to create a SSH folder for your current user. So you can just type make directory. Then it should create the .ssh folder. Then you want to change its permissions to 700. And then once you have that is done, you want to create a file called authorized keys within that folder. And basically what this file is supposed to do is that all kinds of keys that you want to authorize to log into this particular user, you will paste that particular key inside, which I'll show you how to do in a while. So you're going to type in nano to create a new file, that is authorized keys, and then you're going to enter the particular key, which I'll show you how right now. You may have other different kinds of applications, etc., but PuTTY itself has their own generator. It's a SSH key generator. So what I'll do right now is you simply press generate. You can change the encryption key number of bits. The higher it is, the more complex, the more secure. But for most basic purposes, you won't actually have to change the default value. So you simply have to generate this. Wants you to go like that, and then you will generate a key. Now this is your private key that you want to save, and then this private key should be in all the different kind of devices that you have that you want to use to log into your particular server. So you can enter a password for that key file. I would recommend you to do so. So for myself, I'm going to type it in there. And then for the comments for the key, you can simply say like home PC. So this is my home PC that I'm wearing, currently logging into the SSH server. So you can see here, right here, this is the public key that you want to paste into your authorized key file. You can read it yourself actually. So you just want to copy it, Control C or whatever, and then paste it inside this particular file. Then you just exit it and save it. Now you will want to save this private key somewhere. So I'm just going to overwrite it actually. Yeah, there we go. And next up, you want to change the permissions of this particular file to something more suitable and secure. Alright, now once that is all done, please remember, I would like to repeat myself, to save this private key. You don't save the public key, it doesn't really matter. You have to save the private key, and in a place that's secure, that is. Do not randomly give it out to random people unless you want people to have access to your server. Right? So now it's time to enable this key-based login system. So to do so, we want to edit the configuration file for the SSH service. Again, now what you look for is something along the lines of RSA authentication system. As you can see here, it should be yes. If it's no or commented, you just have to uncomment it and then make sure that it's yes. RSA authentication and pub key authentication should be yes. Then you will want to look for text login. You should, there we go. Password authentication. This should be commented out, but what you want to do here is to change it to no. Right? Uncomment it and then change it to no. Save the configuration file, restart the SSH service, and then do not close this particular terminal down, because if there is any problems that you cannot log in, you can basically use this again to revert back changes if any is required. So now open a new terminal once again, and now this time around what you want to do is to use the private key file. So for PuTTY here, what you want to do is to basically create a profile for that particular IP address. As you can see, then you head on to under SSH, you open it up and then go to authentication, and then you put in your private key file, the one that I asked you to save earlier. Now what you do is basically to open it up, and what you see here now is going to be something different. There we go. They'll say we're authenticating with public key Swift Home PC, which is the one that we put in earlier, and then you have to type in your password for that particular key if you have one in place. There you go, you logged in, and this means that the key-based authentication system is working. Now you can check again to see that if whether or not the normal password login is working. So for example, you can put in there, and then instead of having any key files for authentication, you can leave it blank, open it up. Then you want to log in again, you see that there we go, no supported authentication methods are available. The server requires a public key. So that means that your text login is basically gone. So this is basically the last step, really. The next step will be the last step, and that is to implement a firewall. Basically implement firewall rules using IP tables, and this is actually similar to the guide that I've done earlier for the DIY NAS. Now of course, if you're using a VPS and you have all your other kinds of services such as a web server, you're running a web server behind it or something like that, you will have to open the relevant ports. But do refer to that video as to all the different kind of rules that you can put in place. It's a very, very basic guide. If you want to implement even more advanced firewall rules, you can simply Google them, but that guide should be sufficient enough for you to make sure that the server is somewhat secure. So once all of that is done, basically just 5 steps, you can just continue doing whatever you want. Basically, if you want to install your MySQL server, go ahead, your Apache 2, whatever, you just go on ahead and do that. Your server should be somewhat set up and ready to go. So to recap, we have 5 steps. Basically, step 1 is to update the server. And then step 2, you create a new user with sudo access. Then you disable the root access. Then followed by you disable text login and enable the key authentication system, and create your own keys, etc. And the last part is to, of course, implement all your firewall rules. And after that, you are free to do whatever you want. Now there is no need to follow these steps exactly. You might have your own things that you want to install and implement, so go ahead. These are just some guidelines that you can follow, and basically I've been following these steps for all my VPSs so far, as well as my DIY NAS, and so far everything is working smoothly, and that's about it. Again, if you want to trace back and retrace all the different commands that I used, etc., do log do feel free to visit the written article, and all the different commands are there for you to copy and paste, and that will be all. So I'll see you guys again soon. If you have any questions, do leave it in the comments, or you can just message me, or if not, do leave a thumbs up if you find that this video is informative, and do subscribe for more of such content.